And now please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. You have to love midsummer services in New England. You have the sun, or in this case the rain, sort of trickling light through the stained glass windows. There's plenty of space, so you don't have to worry about someone sitting in your pew. When you sing, it's almost as though you're singing in an open field. The crowds just bursting through the doors. Well, maybe not that last part. These are special services, though, because the intimacy that we find here on a service like today adds something holy to our experience of worship. And I must say, there is a touch of irony that we have this particular reading for a summer service. You see, the parable of the sower specifically addresses why some people become Jesus' devoted disciples, those people who come to church every Sunday, and why some people don't. Do you see why it's so relevant for a midsummer service like this one? Now, let me be clear. I'm not critiquing those who are enjoying time with their family or friends in the summer. After all, I was literally just on vacation with my own family last week. But a low service is a good time to ask, why is it that some people seem to get Jesus in church and others do not? Some people get involved. They make church a big part of their lives. They become pillars of the church. Others, not so involved in the structure. Why is that? Now, we like to think that this is a new question, particularly post-pandemic, when churches are wrestling with what church will look like after the COVID-19 crisis. But this very text shows us that it's not a new question. Here, Jesus is addressing it himself in Matthew chapter 13. Why do some people become fruitful followers of Jesus and others do not? Generally, this message is interpreted as referring to different groups of people. Each of these four categories: the seed that falls on the path, the seed that falls on the rocky ground, the seed that falls among thorns, and the seed that falls among good soil, represent different individuals. Now, that interpretation has never sat very well with me. For starters, it puts us in the situation of seeing ourselves as the good soil Christians, while we can point to others and critique them for being the rocky soil or thorny soil type of people. Look at that seed on the path person over there who went to Quebrada instead of church. See that person who's watching Meet the Press every Sunday, rocky soil person. This type of us versus them thinking goes against the teachings of Jesus. We are not to judge others, lest we ourselves be judged. So I really don't like interpreting these four categories as representing four different groups of people. But the other reason I don't like doing that is because when I'm honest, I see myself in each of these four types of soil. I have been there. I have been the seed that falls on the path which the bird takes away. I have been that rocky soil. I have certainly known the thorny soil too. And thankfully, I've also known the good soil. And I bet if you're honest, you've been there too. This message isn't for us to look outside on a low attendance Sunday and wag our fingers at those who are not here. It's for us to take a deep, hard look at ourselves and do the difficult spiritual work. Why do we sometimes feel connected to God and to church and get really involved? And other times, that's far from our minds. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand, the focus of Jesus here is on understanding the word. Now, there's a lot greater risk for us and others in church of doing this than most of us realize. What does it mean to really understand the Word? Here's one particularly relevant example. For most people who are Protestant Christians, we come to the faith through our interaction with the Bible. Protestants are Bible people. It's remarkable that the Bible has continued to inspire people more than 2,000 years after it was first written. There's a palpable power in the biblical word. But this very same interaction with the Bible comes with a huge risk. It's something that I myself have fallen into. When we read the Bible, we often internalize the so-called plain reading of the text. What the text says is what it means. We interpret the commands of the Bible as commands directly from God. Our task as believers is to obey the rules of the Bible. When we fail, we're forgiven, and we can pray for the grace to be better. As many of you know, embracing a plain reading of the text and seeing it as dictates to be obeyed has a lot to say for it. When you do that, you have something stable to put your faith in, to believe in. You hear the command of Jesus to give to whoever asks, and it demands that you be more generous. You read stories like the Good Samaritan or the woman caught in adultery, and they call for you to care for those in pain, regardless of their circumstances, and to refrain from judging others. But then a disturbing thing happens. You begin to question what to do with the miracles of the Bible. Could they actually have happened? If they aren't exactly true as they happened, what do we do with the rest of the text? Do we throw it out if we don't believe all the miracles? You begin to question the 6-day creation account in Genesis or the inflated numbers of the Exodus. As you study more, you see inconsistencies among the Gospels, or say, between 1st and 2nd Chronicles and 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. Then there are the commands that leave you confused, such as, if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. Or, I come not to bring peace but a sword. Or, let the dead bury their own dead. The passages on eternal damnation make you feel deeply uncomfortable, as do the texts that say that salvation is through Jesus alone. What do you do about the second coming? Or about the admonition that women should be silent in church? So often these questions push people away from the Bible, the very thing that brought them to the faith. The bird has come and eaten the seed off the path. You see, this is why Jesus said, even back then, that proper understanding of the Word is essential. You see, there's another way for approaching the text. Rather than seeing the text as infallible, rather than seeing it as a series of rules to be obeyed, you can see the Bible for what it actually is, a personal testimony of faithful people in response to their experiences of God. That's what the Bible is. People in the past had experiences of God or Jesus, and then over time, and often through transmission, those testimonies were written down. Because other people could see the divine in those personal testimonies, they got repeated and retold and eventually incorporated into our sacred text. And over the years, countless others have seen God in their own life experiences in these incredible personal testimonies that we find. But that does not mean that these testimonies were infallible. They didn't get incorporated into the Bible because they were infallible. They are testimonies of God. They're very much dependent on the time and place in which they arose. And when you can see the biblical text that way, as testimonies and not rules, as testimonies and not tablets frozen in stone, it opens up a whole new way of reading the Bible and gleaning deep spiritual truths from it. Understanding. That's what Jesus says. Understanding matters. Biblical interpretation is just one example. But I'm sure you can see why understanding matters so much for nurturing a life of faith. All of us can attest to this. All of us can attest that spiritual experiences are pretty awesome. This is where awesome actually is the appropriate word. Spiritual experiences make you full of awe. You go to church and you hear a sermon, and it truly blows you away. You get all tingly inside. You say to yourself, yes. Or maybe you hear that hymn sung in a way that brings you to tears. Or you find yourself out in nature and something clicks and overwhelms you with just how perfect it is. It's sublime, full of beauty and the divinity of God. These mountaintop experiences are truly life-changing. They can lead you to head to church and seek out more. You might say yes to volunteering or signing up for something new. Always a good thing, just by the way. But what happens when the next sermon is not so great? The next hymn is hard to sing, so you just kind of remain silent and mumble along. You're in a church activity that seems more thankless than anything else. You resolve that you've had enough of church. Now, I will never blame someone for taking time away from church. We all need that from time to time. Churches can be hard places. After all, they're full of people. But here, Jesus is asking us to think about how to grow deeper roots. We don't want seeds that get caught in rocky soil. How do we not spring up with enthusiasm one day and then wither the next? This is where it's important for us to realize that growing roots takes time. Rocky soil leads to growth that's too quick and not deeply grounded. I often tell people that if they want to know God, they should try to get involved in church, and I mean really involved. Something amazing can happen when you commit to worshiping in church every Sunday, or at least every Sunday that you can. You get to feel the rhythms of church. You know what I mean? You realize that not every sermon will speak to you. Not every hymn or anthem will lift your soul. But when you really commit to church, to the rhythms of worship, that's okay. It doesn't all have to be perfect. You begin to see beyond the surface of church. You realize that maybe it'll be in the simple action of saying hi to someone after the service that is why God wanted you to be there that day. You might be in church because someone else needs you here. Some of the most powerful times of church for me have been when I least wanted to go. I was there all grumpy and frustrated. Do I really want to go to church today? Then somewhere in the service, God just breaks me wide open. And I can feel anew the grace of God. And I can say, thank you, God. I needed that. And I didn't know it. Now, since you're the summer crowd of worshipers, I'm guessing you probably know what I mean. The mountaintop experiences are great, but you need roots too. The roots open you up to things that you would not have imagined, but they take time and commitment in order to grow. Now, Jesus doesn't stop by highlighting those who lack understanding or those who don't develop the roots of faith. He also brings up the thorns. Oh, the thorns. If there's anything that we know well, it is the thorns, the cares of life, that crowd and choke out religion. For me, this has always taken the form of my good friend, anxiety. Hello, anxiety, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. I have the curse of being a type A personality. This is not a good thing. It means that from my early years onward, I have nurtured my sense of self, my self-esteem, based on my accomplishments. As a result, those accomplishments and the drive to achieve them takes on existential significance. Oh, if I don't get this done, if I don't accomplish that, all will be lost. Now, in truth, not all will be lost, but it's hard for me to see that. And when I let these anxieties over achieving the next goal become all-consuming, I lose sight of God. I feel myself being choked off from that which gives my life such meaning and joy. A few weeks ago, I was reminded of this in a conversation that I had with Mimi D'Angelo. I had asked her to meet to talk about our new small group curriculum that we're going to launch this fall. Now, for all sorts of valid reasons, I feel this small group effort is essential, not ancillary, to the thriving of the Hills Church. Oh, you'll hear more about it. But it does involve a lot of organization and logistics, two things that I am not good at and that spark anxiety. It also involves change, and churches, like any other institution, are resistant to change. So I was stressed about the whole thing, and when Mimi arrived in my office, I launched into an impassioned speech about the importance of small groups and how our racial justice initiatives could fit into it. And when I finally took a breath, those of you who know me know that when I really get going on the subject, sometimes I forget to breathe. Mimi stopped me and said, "John, you should have started our conversation by asking how I'm doing. You're still new here, and yet you chose not to begin by getting to know me better." I paused and then said, "You're right. I'm sorry." She was right, of course. I should have prioritized getting to know her and checking in with her before launching into my to-dos. That's, after all, why I'm a preacher, to get to know people, to have that connection, that divine connection with folks. Not, it turns out, to go through my to-do list. But the thorns, my anxiety, my type A personality had led me to put God aside in our conversation while I barreled ahead with my all-important agenda. These thorns are tricky. They grow up quickly and surreptitiously. What are your thorns? I'm sure you have them. Are they all the endless kids' activities that barely give you a chance to breathe? Are they the demands at work, demands that can come with crippling anxieties? Are they those things that you probably should give up but can't seem to because you don't want to admit that you're older and you really can't do them anymore? These are tough. They are hard. But something about Jesus calling us out, as Mimi generously and gracefully did a few weeks ago for me, helps us to see the thorns that we so often don't. Now, this would be enough for all of us to sit under a tree for a while. Jesus' parables have a tendency to do that for us. Here's Jesus looking at us straight in the face and saying, do we have a right understanding of the word? What might that look like? Are we cultivating deep roots in our faith, or merely relying on the afterglow of mountaintop experiences? Are thorns cutting us off from our experiences of God? Do we even see the thorns that are there? But what I love so much is that Jesus doesn't end there. He doesn't simply name the pitfalls of the faith. He reminds us how great and life-changing a life of faith can be. It can yield a crop of 30, 60, or 100-fold. It can open us up to a truly abundant life of joy with God. Not just happiness, but joy, true joy. What a wonderful thing to be reminded of. Now, I'm not someone who loves air travel at all. I find it immensely stressful. But I was thinking about this parable as I flew to General Synod a couple weeks ago. And I was considering how great life with God truly is. And I was in a good mood, even though it was super early in the morning. When I arrived for this incredibly early morning flight on June 30th, full of that joy that comes from God. And then I went to go get a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. Now, the cup of coffee at this Dunkin' Donuts in Terminal A was like 65 people long. Now, normally I would get impatient and even a bit testy. After all, I had not yet had my coffee in the morning. But I wasn't that day. I had this parable in my head, and I was just smiling in line. It'll all get done, I thought to myself. And when I got to the counter, I saw the poor folks busily trying to take care of all the customers, most of whom were not being that polite. And so I just asked them how they were doing. I imagined they might need a word of encouragement, and I tried to give them that. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. I smiled back. And that same awareness of God's presence carried me onto the plane with the person sitting next to me. As I got into my Uber when I got into Indianapolis. It was such a joyful way to go through life. I saw God in everyone I met. The closing worship service at Synod was truly glorious. They were raising money for a fund that would support people training for ministry who have disabilities. And they named the fund after Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the true heroes of the civil rights movement. If you don't know her story, you should. She was one of the most remarkable individuals I've read about and I've read a lot of biography. And the woman who got up to make the call to offering for this service was blind. She needed help to get on stage, and then she proceeded to read off her Braille notepad and gave one of the best calls to offering I've ever heard. It reminded me of how often God speaks through people with disabilities. Those who have had to struggle with things that we take for granted so often have insights, spiritual insights, that the rest of us need to hear. Then we sang one of Mark Miller's songs. Mark, if you know him, is immensely talented. And the song begins with the words, "In the midst of pain, I choose love. In the midst of pain, sorrow falling down like rain, I want the sun again. I choose love. I choose love." So there I was, tears streaming down my face. I get very melodramatic in situations like this. And the service kept going from there, and afterwards I was so full of God's love, I relished saying goodbye to friends I hadn't seen in a long time. One friend told me about his plan to adopt kids, and I was like, this is fantastic. I got so excited. Was able to say how great a father he will be, because I know he will be. God was palpably around me, and it was awesome. When those seeds fall on good ground, we get to reap fruit, 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. What great words of encouragement Jesus is giving to us, to you, in our parable this morning. Here you are on a low Sunday in the summer. Something inside you led you to be here or to turn on the screen and watch this morning. And as you go forth from this place, choose that life with God. It is truly the best path. Nothing compares. I so want that for you, my brothers and sisters in the faith. Seek understanding. Commit to growing deep roots. See the thorns that so often get in the way. And rejoice when that seed does fall on the good soil. You all are the good soil. You are the very best, because God herself made you that way. So let the seeds grow this summer. Let the seeds grow this day, this week. Let the seeds grow, and watch how great that fruit will be.